One of the interesting things that I read in your book was when you got to the part, when I got to the part where we talked about the death of George Floyd, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And you detailed former President Trump's response to the video that he saw. To
Hmm.
paraphrase what you said he saw it. He didn't even really finish it,
Hmm.
and behind closed doors, he showed
Hmm.
empathy. But when he got on the main stage,
Hmm.
he showed something totally different.
Yeah.
You've had conversations with Trump, so you know him on a little bit more personal basis than a lot of us average Americans do.
Hmm.
Why do you
Hmm.
think he kind of shifted gears?
Yeah. Um, so start with the beginning of that. I mean, he's a very visceral learner, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he's affected by videos and moving pictures more than just still pictures or words or briefings, right? I mean, um, in the very beginning of the administration, you might remember the United States dropped bombs in Syria based on, after Trump saw a video uh, of a chemical weapons attack there and the effect on children, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there's quotes at the time where these, beautiful babies, and he was emotionally affected by this video, and my reporting is that the same thing happened when he watched the George Floyd video. Now, so a couple of things here. One is you have to remember it took him a couple of days before he even watched it,
Yeah.
right? And it's an awful 8 minutes of video, right? I mean, but he doesn't make it through the whole thing. He never actually watched the entire video. He turned it off, and in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, the people around him were, so that he was affected, right? That he thought it was horrible, and talking about how cops get carried away, and he knows cops like that back in Queens, and he'd heard stories about that, and it's awful, it's wrong, and right, like things that you don't hear him say in public ever. Um, but what happens, he starts to take it personally. Like, George Floyd's death had nothing to do with Donald Trump, right?
Mm-hmm.
The protests that happened in the days after that had nothing to do with Donald Trump. But that's not
Zip.
how Trump sees it. Trump sees it as a rebuke of him and a rebuke of his law and order image, and begins to take it very personally, and decides, right, that okay, well, you know, I've done things for the black community. He passed a criminal justice reform,
Mm-hmm.
that he secured some permanent money for historically black colleges. That was not that that the schools had to fight for every year, and again, those things have nothing to do with what's happening in the streets and the civil rights abuses, right? But like he sees the protest and says, well, you know, after everything I've done for them,
Yeah.
they still hate me, right? So now, and that just for whatever reason cements in his mind, and he goes, full barrel on the law and order image to the point where that he wants to shoot Americans, right? He's telling a room full of military officials, and officials from the Pentagon, that uh, he wants the military to shoot Americans who are peacefully protesting civil rights abuses, shoot them in the leg, shoot them in the foot, crack their
Mm-hmm.
skulls. I mean, this is not one time. This happens repeatedly. I mean, this is an important point in not in the book, but in 2020. I mean, this is where things really start to turn for Trump for the worse. Is
Yeah.
and long time relationships he has with senior officials in the administration start to turn, and where he becomes. I mean, where these folks, the people around him told me that they thought he'd become dangerous,
Mm.
become violent and unhinged here, because he's so desperate to hold on to power at this point,
Yeah.
that he's willing to talk about these again, shooting fellow Americans over peaceful protest, is just shocking.
Hey, what's happening? This is Deontay Carroll, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast. And listen, I want to let y'all know something. You can follow us on many different platforms. You can follow me on Facebook at Deontay J. Carroll Sr. You can also follow me on Twitter at Deontay J. Carroll, no apostrophe. Also, I'm on Instagram at Deontay Carroll, all one word, no apostrophe. And lastly, you want to follow me on YouTube at Deontay Carroll because I post all of my episodes and post all of my shows from the podcast on my YouTube page. So if you want to continue to stay connected, make sure you like, share, and subscribe and follow me on all of my social media platforms. And remember, until next time, keep that volume turned up. Peace. Be blessed.